story about my father and a story about my mother, and I'm going to try hard not to burst out laughing and not to start crying. So I'll try to keep my Swedish composure. So I was with my dad on a trip to Los Llanos. Los Llanos means the plains. And we stopped at a home, and so many people knew my dad, and people were always so gracious. But this particular in this particular home, a woman picked a limon dulce. Limon dulce, I think in this country you call them pomelos, but it's a citrus fruit. They're about so big, it's maybe a little bit bigger than a grapefruit. Tastes completely different than a grapefruit. Anyway,
it's sweet.
Very sweet, and it has much less acid, say, than a grapefruit or, of course, a lemon.
Yeah.
Much less, but very distinctive flavor. Anyway, so she gives my dad this nice big limon dulce. Limon dulce means sweet lemon.
Right.
And it's shaped more like a lemon than like a grapefruit. So anyway, as we're leaving, the lady says to my dad, "Now be sure not to cut the fruit with a knife." And that seemed a little bit odd. And I can't remember if my dad said he would or said he wouldn't. For sure he didn't say that he would. But then we left the home, and Dad started to explain to me what that was all about. And what that was about was that this woman believed that if we cut the limon dulce with a knife, her tree would die.
Oh, wow. Oh.
And pretty soon Dad, as he's explaining this to me, he pulls out a knife and starts to peel the limon dulce, and we ate it. So he was completely kind to the woman. He didn't try to argue with her or set her straight or anything like that, but he wanted to.
He didn't follow the rules.
Be sure that I didn't pick up a superstition, and that he didn't want me to fall for the superstition.
Did you ever go back to see if the tree was alive?
Well, you know, Dad, Moody Bible Institute, you know, very conservative, but they believed in science, you know, and Mom and Dad, at Moody Bible Institute, they basically taught that science was science, and they didn't want their students to be superstitious, you know. I think Moody was good that way. Anyway, the story I wanted to tell about my mother, you know, I don't think either one of my parents told a lot of jokes, but there was one thing that Mother told, and it always stuck with me. But she called it a triple pun story. So the way the story goes is something like this. There was a man and his family, and they bought a cattle farm. And they were trying to figure out what name to give to the farm. And this occurred. Picture my mother telling this. So they had a big what to do about what to call the farm. And this was a family And it was apparent that they had either 2 or 3 sons, and they were all going to work on the cattle farm together. So they finally decided to call the farm Focus. They're going to call the farm Focus. So why did they pick that name, Focus? Well, Focus is where the sons raise meat. You get the
Double pun.
You get the pun. It's a triple pun. The sons raise meat. The sons raise meat. So Mother was very proud of her triple pun story. Well, the other thing is Mother had a little book of poetry, and she would read poetry to us. Every night we had story hour, and certain poems in the book would just bring tears to her eyes, you know. And you could, if she started to read a certain poem, you would get to know, because we heard these poems repeatedly. You would kind of know where she was going to get choked up and cry. And her poems were very beautiful, and somehow I inherited that book.
Really?
So I still have that book that she read to us, and she has some notes in it, you know. And every once in a while, there's a word that she didn't understand. She would look it up, so you would see her little definition of the word in the book. But her love of poetry was infectious, you know. I just love those same poems that she read over and over. Like one of them was Annabel Lee by Edgar Allan Poe, who was, who died in the poem, and it's a tearjerker. It's very beautiful, beautifully written. So I have already promised that book to Rochelle. So Rochelle is very anxious to pick it up, but I haven't parted with it yet, and I'll probably bring it around sometime, and we should read some of those poems that Mother loved so much.
Oh, neat.
That's all, folks.
Okay.